What happened to the FIRE movement? It started as a countercultural idea pioneered by some smart people. They gained financial freedom by rejecting many of the trappings of consumerism and saving 50% of their income or more. The book Your Money or Your Life, published in 1992, was the first to bring FIRE concepts to the mainstream. And early FIRE advocates were able to think outside of the box. They realized that the United States is awash in excess and waste. They could live more efficiently and could happily live on less and save a huge percentage of their income. After several years, they could stop mandatory work and retire early. And thanks to some popular bloggers and podcasters, FIRE grew in popularity. The FIRE acronym itself has its roots in internet message boards where users needed a short way to refer to what they were doing. FIRE works as an adjective, what's your FIRE date, and a verb, when will you fire? It also covers people that just want to achieve financial independence, FI, and those that actually want to stop working and retire early, RE. I was swept up in the FIRE ride myself, and I have zero regrets about it. One day I decided that I actively wanted to learn more about personal finance. And after making my way through Money Girl, Dave Ramsey, and Listen Money Matters, I eventually discovered FIRE and Mr. Money Mustache. I was inspired right away, and those ideas gave purpose to some frugal tendencies that I already had. And it's worked out great over the past decade. But if FIRE is so great, why don't we hear about it as much as we used to? It feels to me like FIRE peaked in popularity right around 2019. And some quick research on Google Trends confirms this. Here's the search interest over time for the term financial independence, retire early. This is just in the United States, and here's the same trend worldwide. In both cases, the search term definitely peaked in 2019. But why did FIRE ever catch on like this with the masses? I think it's because it seemed possible and there were plenty of examples of people retiring early and doing it successfully. It seemed to be a simple and worthwhile thing to do. While everyone's caught up and using their income to buy more and better stuff and paying for ever-increasing convenience and comfort, the FIRE movement showed us a different path. A path to freedom and fulfillment by stepping off of the hedonic treadmill. And that idea really caught fire in the mid-2010s. It also helps that FIRE rose in popularity during one of the longest bull runs in US stock market history. I don't want to downplay that impact at all. It was a long bull trend with huge returns in the S&P 500, and without this ongoing bull market as the backdrop, FIRE wouldn't have been as easily within reach for so many people, and I don't think it would have been as popular. Early on, the FIRE ideas were embraced only by the daring few, those willing to stop and even reverse their own lifestyle inflation, and to embrace the simple life. They were willing to downsize their house, to go down to one car from two, ride a bike for their transportation, take on DIY projects, and mow their own lawns with a manual push mower. They saw the value in doing hard things by choice, not only because it saves money, but because it's a more satisfying way to live. But FIRE went from that way to completely hack the consumer culture to a normal idea, embraced or at least considered by the mainstream. In this more mainstream version of FIRE, we save a little more into our 401k, we cut out a few purchases here and there, but we still live with all the same comforts and conveniences as before. There's no urgency, and there's no fundamental change in how we live. And that's when FIRE lost its teeth. FIRE became Americanized. It became convenient, and it became almost indistinguishable from regular old personal finance. FIRE became a normal idea, and it interested a lot more people, which is cool. But once it was digested and, let's face it, criticized by the mainstream, it didn't work the same way for this new crowd of people who were now hearing about it on Yahoo News or CNBC or the most popular financial podcasts of the time. And of course it didn't work. The version of FIRE they learned about was a filtered version. It was FIRE Light. Because if you want to achieve financial independence at a reasonable age, it's not going to just be a couple of tweaks and you're there. You have to shake things up, get weird, embrace frugality as a lifestyle, and do things very differently than everyone else around you. Otherwise, you're just following the standard mainstream personal finance advice. So FIRE kind of merged with personal finance, but how exactly did this happen? Let's take a look at some of the key players of the modern FIRE movement and see if we can piece this together. The modern FIRE movement started with Jacob Lund Fisker and his blog Early Retirement Extreme. And maybe that blog is where things really start, but the blog culminated in his book by the same name, and that was published in 2010. Jacob Lund Fisker is an astrophysicist, and the book is written like one. It's dense, academic, and difficult to read. Frankly, I never finished it. But I think the message was, become your own Renaissance person, learn to do it all, save like 75% of your income, and learn to live simply and efficiently. The blog and the book appealed to engineer types who started their own blogs, taking the same ideas and running with them. And in April 2011, a new blog was born, MrMoneyMustache.com. Written by Mr. Money Mustache, which is the alter ego of Colorado resident and Canadian immigrant Pete Adney. Mr. Money Mustache's blog became very popular because Mr. Money Mustache had some great ideas and interesting ways of thinking about things, and not to mention Pete is a fantastic writer, and he got his message across in humorous and inspiring ways. He attributes his wisdom to being a naive Canadian man, but he has some brilliant blog posts. A few of those stand out for me, and I'll link to those in the video description. Mr. Money Mustache's blog culminated in a talk at the World Domination Summit where he called out our need for ever-increasing comfort and convenience. Mr. Money Mustache was also featured on an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast, which spread his ideas to an even bigger audience. But during this time period, we also get into what I think of as the golden age of FIRE. Mr. Money Mustache was writing regularly, and other early FIRE bloggers were also adding a lot of value and inspiration and filling in some of the holes. Podcasts were coming on strong too at this time. You had bloggers like Go Curry Cracker, an absolute fountain of ideas, tax strategies. You had Justin from Root of Good, loved some of his posts on tax optimizations and having a tiny paycheck. You got to check out this blog post. You also had Joshua Sheets and his podcast called Radical Personal Finance, which the title alone really appealed to me. I wanted to hear radical ideas, and he did have some. You know, he had ideas like sleeping in the back of his Prius versus staying in a hotel room, finding free things in the dumpster. He just had this point of view that the US is awash in excess and that you can take advantage of that. There was also Liz and her blog Frugalwoods with the urban angle on things. You know, she and her husband lived in a minimalist home in Cambridge, and one of their classic posts was about hacking a soda stream with a CO2 canister to get very low cost soda water on tap in their home at all times. And then of course you had Brandon, the mad Fientist, with his full-on geeky explorations of hacking retirement accounts and alternative ways to think about these accounts and use them differently for early retirement. There was also JLCollins' blog, where he espoused a very simple version of investing using basically only one fund, VTSAX, also known as VTI. He kind of became the voice of wisdom on investing in the FIRE movement, and his book, The Simple Path to Wealth, found an even wider audience even outside of the FIRE movement. With many individual investors switching away from actively managed funds to passive funds, JL's simple path approach was the right place at the right time, and it just added more fuel for this FIRE. Of course, some criticism reared its head as the FIRE movement gained popularity. One argument was basically that it was impossible for most people to save that much money. Another argument was that it was for only young bros with high incomes, mostly tech workers and engineers. Fair criticism, but just because it started there doesn't mean it was only for them. I mean, engineers tend to be smart and think in terms of systems, similar to Jacob Lund Fisker. So of course it was going to appeal to engineer types at first. But the message spread, especially when ChooseFI came on the scene. Near the end of 2016, ChooseFI started their podcast, and this was Jonathan Mendoza and Brad Barrett. Jonathan's enthusiasm was infectious, and Brad held down the sensible end of things. They made a great pair. They also had some great interviews. ChooseFI was able to spread the message to a larger audience, but a big reason was that they toned down the more hardcore edges. It was more like, just be a little bit smarter, just do a couple things more efficiently. And don't get me wrong, they did an amazing job at growing their audience and spreading the FIRE concept. But over the course of this time, while ChooseFI got popular and FIRE got popular, I felt that the message got watered down a little. They even published a Baby Steps of FI manual, which is way too close to Dave Ramsey's approach, and it also makes the whole thing seem too easy, too safe, like anyone can do it. And the whole thing of FIRE is, it works because you do things differently from everyone else, and not because you take baby steps. Dave Ramsey wants us to take baby steps. I want to take big, huge steps. I want to get there, and I want to get there fast. Give me the hacks. Tell me that I've been a moron in my spending habits, explain how I've been a consumer sucker, explain how I should do things differently than those around me. That's the message that resonates with me. And then there was the documentary film, Playing with Fire. The FIRE movement deserved its own feature documentary film, and it finally got one in mid-2019. This was just as the movement was peaking and arguably waning in popularity. The documentary was about a single young family navigating the decision to intentionally shift to a more frugal way of living. The film portrayed FIRE in a positive light, but more on the soft version of FIRE. It wouldn't have inspired me to make a big change in my life if I saw it 6 years earlier. But with that film, the FIRE movement had perhaps reached its peak mainstream popularity. And I think it lost some of its appeal because the message was getting softer. And for me, the extreme parts of FIRE are what attracted me to it in the first place. And that's what kept me motivated. I could see the results working in my day-to-day life and in my investment accounts as well. I liked the extreme frugality part. I liked going against the grain, being the frugal weirdo. I totally get that this approach is not for most people, but when the message got softened and watered down, it kind of lost some of its excitement to me as an alternative way to think and act in a society that's awash in materialism, consumerism, and debt. It became more and more normal to the point now where many versions of FIRE are indistinguishable from regular personal finance. And once we're back to just regular personal finance, we're not doing anything different from the norm, and we're getting the same results. If you truly want to achieve financial independence at a young age, if you truly want to retire early, well, you have to get weird, you have to get a little extreme by most people's standards. I mean, even Dave Ramsey knows that normal is broke. One of his best catchphrases, by the way. If I came across FIRE for the first time now, in 2024, I would be confused about what makes it interesting. It's like, great, some people make a lot of money, they save it into their 401k, and they quit their job. I wouldn't get that it's also in reach for someone like me. Today's version of FIRE would not inspire me to change my ways much at all, never mind make the drastic lifestyle changes that are necessary to achieve it within 10 years. But a softer message wasn't the only thing that stopped FIRE from spreading, because then the pandemic happened in 2020, and it made work from home the norm. I think this deflated a lot of the urgency that people had to quit their jobs. Those soul-sucking office jobs became a lot more tolerable when you can do it from the comfort of your own home. No cubicles, no awkward meetings, in person anyway, no commute, no need to wear clean clothes every day. It was a whole new way to work for many of us, and FIRE suddenly became less important. Then there was the Die with Zero book, which was published in 2021. This was not the final nail in the coffin, but it was a good representation of the other side of the FIRE coin. Bill Perkins made a compelling case that financial freedom isn't the ultimate goal, but rather fulfillment is the ultimate goal. This book made a big impact in the FIRE community, and it made people rethink how they're spending their limited time in this one life that we all have. Especially now that the early FIRE devotees are wealthy, and now they have a new problem. How do they go from efficient savers to efficient spenders? This cohort of bloggers, podcasters, and FIRE followers from the 2010s are now either comfortably financially independent or they've moved on from the whole thing. They've also gotten older. So what was once an exciting story of a guy in his 30s who retired super early is now just another dude in his 50s who is early retired. Not a big deal. Mr. Money Mustache himself says that he was a 30-something retiree. The story is a lot more interesting when you're in your 30s. I think what FIRE needs now is the next generation. Maybe a new Gen Z spin on FIRE for those just getting started. And with inflation, high home prices with limited inventory, and AI looming on the horizon to take all of our jobs away, they really do need a version of FIRE that resonates with them. Something that gets them on the fast track to financial freedom. And they can start with the ideas that made the FIRE movement popular 5 to 10 years ago, because those ideas worked. Even if you think FIRE is nonsense or whatever, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's tons of great ideas there. Be more efficient and less wasteful, ultimately leading to financial freedom and a more fulfilling life. And if you want to achieve FIRE, check out this video where I explain the math of how to retire early. But the 4% rule is a great shortcut to get you in the ballpark of how much you'll need saved and invested to reach financial independence.